Okay, so today we're going to talk about coastal erosion. This is a problem that almost every country faces, any coastal country, any country with a coast faces. Um, and that's because erosion is natural. But there are ways that you can prevent it, and I'm going to talk about three of those methods today. Those are the efforts to stop coastal erosion, and we can even see some of those locally. So I'll bring up some examples of that too. For context, 40% of the US coastline experiences erosion. Um, like, think about just California alone, how there are beaches that flood or experience storms. This is actually especially prevalent on the East Coast where there are hurricanes and floods. So if you think about every year when there's a big hurricane, how much damage that does. Moving into that, there's $500 million of damage done annually because of erosion. So it costs a lot of money to prevent these things, but honestly, trying to prevent erosion can save money in the long run, so you don't have to rebuild because erosion primarily affects like infrastructure, right? Because it's a natural thing, so it wouldn't be a problem unless it affects humans. The first prevention method we're going to talk about is a breakwater. Breakwaters are a form of coastal engineering, and as you can see in this picture here, they're made out of stones, concrete, or marine piles, and they create this thing called a shadow zone, which is behind the structure. So as you can see behind each of these little concrete or stone piles, um, the coast kind of juts out a little bit, and then the places where it's like in between the two stone piles, the coast recedes, or yeah, it recedes because the whole point of the breakwater is to stop the waves from having like strong enough energy to remove or eat away at the sediment. So they reduce powerful waves and absorb about 70 to 90% of that energy. So the waves aren't as tall or as strong, and so then it like blocks off the areas behind so that they won't get eroded away. And as you can see, you can like they actually work, like you can physically see them doing their job. But the problem with these is that they can really alter natural sediment distribution because sand and whatever gets stuck behind the breakwaters and isn't allowed to move freely. So that can kind of affect um, like microorganisms, like on a smaller scale on these beaches, but they do help. Something I found was that jetties and breakwaters are kind of like used similarly, like the terms, but this is actually Morro Bay. Like you can see Morro Rock right in the middle there, and then off to the right is where the boats dock. But jetties are harbor protection, and they come out perpendicular from the coastline. So as you can see at the bottom middle there, that little like line is a jetty coming out to protect the harbor. And they're usually found at river mouths and harbor entrances. They protect coastlines from currents and tides. Like this one was actually built by the U.S. Navy, and it prevents the area that the boats dock. They keep channels clean of sediment buildup, but then this can cause erosion at adjacent beaches because it interrupts longshore sediment transport. Because if the water can't come in here, it's got to go somewhere else, so it moves further down the beach. And then the final one we're going to talk about are groins, and these are sediment trappers. So these aren't these come directly out of the beach, and they are perpendicular to the shore. You can kind of see they're not the best looking, but they basically trap sediment on the upcurrent side, and so that helps the beaches kind of stay beaches. And it interrupts longshore transport, so sediment transport. So it's like we know the waves coming in at an angle, retract, perpendicular to the water. And so as that happens, the sediment all gets trapped on one side of all of these. For example, like it's looking like it's going to get, for example, if it's moving down the beach, the sediment's going to get trapped on the right side of these groins. So they're good when they're installed in groups, but the problem with these is that they kind of don't allow the sediment to be naturally transported, so it can starve adjacent beaches of sediments. So it's like the beach isn't going to get longer downwards. Or beaches on the other side that rely on that, they're going to be kind of blocked off, and then those can get smaller in their own regard. I wanted to present some examples of like where you can find these things. So breakwaters, one of them you can find in Long Beach. There's multiple segments, and they total up to 6.2 miles. Jetties, like I said, you can find one in Morro Bay, and it created a protected space for otters, seals, and birds. And you can find a groin or groins at Pebble Beach in Brighton, UK, and they're built from hardwood, actually. Breakwaters are best for harbors and open coasts. Jetties are best for river mouths and inlets, and groins are best for sandy beaches. So keep that in mind and keep an eye out for these when you're at the beach.